Well, Saturday was a tough one. I was there. You guys might have been there. You guys were watching on television. A top three showdown, and it felt like it was completely one sided. 27-13, the final score, Georgia over Tennessee. But Tennessee's still in a really good spot. And I'll tell you exactly why here on a Monday, Locked On Balls.
You are Locked On Balls, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into it. This is your Monday edition of Locked On Balls. Can't thank you enough for hanging out with me here today. It's your Tennessee Volunteers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And we're wherever you can find your podcast completely for free. Made it over the 5,000 subscriber mark on YouTube with the live show Friday. So everybody that was there and hanging out, had a blast. Thank you so much for that. Today's episode has been brought to you in part by LinkedIn Jobs. It helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. I'm Eric Kane. I work over at VolQuest.com of the On3 site. And, we got a lot to unravel here on a Monday. Obviously, not the outcome any of you guys wanted. It was not a very fun game to cover, of course, because Tennessee kind of came out flat, and it was unfortunate. It was a ruckus environment. Sanford Stadium was really, really loud. I mean, it was almost deafening, I guess, in terms of how loud it was in that stadium, and it caused Tennessee some problems. And we're going to discuss all that and more. Have some scoring plays, courtesy of the Ball Radio Network, and hand out my stats and Caner grades here on this Monday edition of the show. But first, some big takeaways. First and foremost, Georgia is a good football team. All right. And I hope everybody I think was confident going into the last football game. There was reasons to be confident on behalf of Tennessee because Tennessee is a good football team and still is. Hope in my preview, I didn't act like Georgia was overrated, not a good football team, because I didn't mean for that to happen if that was the case, because Georgia is a good football team. Georgia's a really good football team. And sometimes good football teams make some plays. And Georgia made some plays throughout that football game. A 75-yard punt was a game changer at that point in the football game. Stetson Bennett, 13-yard touchdown run. That was a really good play. His touchdown pass in the back of the end zone over a leaping Jalin McCullough there. I mean, that was a play, right? Sometimes you just make some plays, and Georgia made some plays. It kind of is what it is sometimes. But also, Tennessee helped Georgia out in a lot of different areas. Give credit to Georgia. Georgia was the better football team on Saturday. I'm not saying it wasn't. It was the better football team. It was the best offensive line Tennessee will see all season long, hands down. It's a really good offensive unit, but Tennessee also helped Georgia out tremendously in this football game by giving up three big chunk plays defensively. Let's go over those three plays. In the first quarter, first touchdown scoring drive for Georgia, it was a 52-yard pass from Stetson Bennett to Arian Smith down that sideline. This wasn't really a play that Tennessee gave them, but it was just one of those plays where you go and make a good football play, kind of what I was talking about a moment ago. Brandon Turnage was all over Smith. I mean, in fact, he could have been called for defensive pass interference for holding some of that jersey. It was a good throw, and it was a good catch. That was a good football play, but that was chunk play number one that led to the Bennett touchdown run. Chunk play number two, the second touchdown scoring drive for Georgia in the first quarter. 37 yards from Stetson Bennett. This is actually a touchdown play from Stetson Bennett to Ladd McConkey, who, by the way, was all over the place in that football game. And Danico Slaughter, who's brand new at cornerback, bit on the double move, and McConkey was wide open down the sideline. That is a chunk play, 37 yards. That's a touchdown. That's two chunk plays. The third chunk play that Tennessee really helped Georgia out with, or flat out gave Georgia, this one just flat out gave them, it was Kenny McIntosh out of the backfield. We discussed Kenny McIntosh, the third leading receiver on Georgia's ball club. They throw the tight ends. They throw the running backs. Kenny McIntosh, very active in the receiving game. Comes out of the backfield, runs a wheel route, runs right by Jalin McCullough. It was Jalin McCullough's guy. He came out to guard him and just got whiffed. He ran right by him, 52 yards down that sideline. Later, that led to a touchdown, number 3 of the football game for Georgia, which was the Rosamie Jack Saint in the back of the end zone there, which was a really good play for Stetson Bennett. So those are three chunk plays defensively that Tennessee just gave them. And outside of those three, they still count. I'm not saying they don't count. They still count. I thought Tennessee buckled up and played pretty good defense. Did they play good enough to win the game? No, you give up 3 plays right there. But I thought Tennessee was pretty solid against the run, 130 yards for Georgia on 42 attempts. I thought Tennessee was really good against the run. Also, though, helping Georgia out, self-inflicting wounds. Man, Tennessee had 8 pre-snap penalties in this football game, 7 of which were false starts. Let's break this down real quick. On drive number 1 for Tennessee, 2 false starts, one on Gerald Mincey, one on Princeton Fan. Fance was on 3rd down. That settles in a field goal for Tennessee. Drive number 2 for Tennessee, a false start. It was Mincey on 1st down. That led to a punt. Drive number 5, disaster strikes for Tennessee. 2 false start penalties on this drive, one from Darnell Wright, one from Jalin Wright. Tennessee went from 3rd and 2 at the +9 inside the 10-yard line to having to kick a field goal at 3rd after a failed 3rd and 12 from the 19-yard line because of 2 false start penalties. And then drive number 9 of the football game for Tennessee, 2 false start penalties, one on J.J. Crawford, the other on Darnell Wright, and that led to a turnover on downs. Georgia made plays. Georgia's a good football team, but Tennessee also just killed itself with self-inflicting wounds. Again, pre-snap penalties, 8 on the day, 7 of which were false starts. Tennessee was penalized 9 times for 55 yards, 8 of which were pre-snap penalties. That's not championship football, okay? So Georgia made plays. Georgia's a good team. Tennessee helped them out. 3 chunk plays on defense, and then self-inflicting penalties, especially pre-snap for the Volunteers in this football game. But I think what we also learned in this game, this does not mean Tennessee's not one of the best teams in the country, because I think it is. It still is. But Tennessee still has ways to go to build a roster that with depth and talent like Kirby Smart has at Georgia. I just think it was kind of not night and day, but I mean, it was kind of plain and simple. That was a big takeaway from me Saturday night. And Kirby wasn't lights out from day one, right? I mean, I know it didn't take him long, but in terms of building a roster to be competitive each and every single year, you had no Nolan Smith in this game. Beal, his backup, went out in this football game at points and times. Their best linebacker went out for points and times in this football game. But they were able to overcome it because they have quality depth on that football team. Tennessee's got talent, and Tennessee's much better in depth in certain areas, but still not quite there yet. And that's kind of the difference in Georgia and Tennessee, in my opinion, especially from watching that football game. But saying all that, 27-13 loss is not fun. I understand that. Tennessee fell 27-13 between the hedges at Georgia. It's not fun. I get all that. But saying all that, Tennessee is still in a great position in terms of postseason aspirations. Tennessee is going to be a heavy favorite. Checked out the line over BetOnline for Tennessee, Missouri. Tennessee's a 21-point favorite on a Sunday, 3-touchdown favorite. Tennessee's going to be heavily favored against Missouri, against South Carolina, and against Vanderbilt to end the football season. Tennessee should win those 3 games, and Tennessee should finish the regular season 11-1 with a 5-1 mark against ranked foes, playing one of the toughest schedules in the country. Clemson lost on Saturday night. LSU beat Alabama in overtime Saturday night. That LSU beatdown continues to look better and better. There's a very real chance that Tennessee could be ranked. Saturday night I kept saying 4th, but I think I'm going to slide back to 5. I mean, you got to give TCU its due, right? I think TCU might slide in there to 4th. We can talk more about this tomorrow, but there's a very real chance that Tennessee could still be ranked inside the top 4, if not the 4. That number 5 spot is what I believe. Whenever the rankings come back out on Tuesday. Tennessee is likely, unless there's a collapse from Georgia, not going to Atlanta, not playing in the SEC championship game. But we've seen it before where you take 2 teams from the SEC. Georgia will go on and beat LSU likely now because LSU controls its own destiny. And then you'll take Georgia, and then potentially you'll take Tennessee as well. Because if you're Tennessee, sitting there again, 11-1 record, 5-1 against ranked foes, the strength of schedule, only lost to Georgia, why wouldn't you take the Volunteers? So you had to get some help. You got a lot of help on Saturday night. Clemson losing. Oregon's going to have something to say about that. TCU's going to have something to say about that. But Tennessee is still in a really, really good spot in terms of postseason aspirations. Losing sucks. The way Tennessee lost sucks. We're going to dive into that here in segments 2 and 3. But the big takeaway, the season's not over. Tennessee is still what it wants to accomplish in the postseason, minus an SEC championship, most likely, still very, very much in play here. So that is the biggest takeaway in my humble opinion for this football game moving forward. All right, we're going to get into scoring plays and a lot of cool stuff. Kaner stats and grades coming up later in the show. All that and more coming up next year on Locked On Balls. But these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. You can add the job with the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and ultimately hire. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering qualified hires to its leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. We are rolling right along here on a Monday edition of Locked On Vols. Guys, I appreciate it. Check out Locked On Sports today. Take of the day, the biggest stories in sports. Make that your second listen behind Locked On Balls here today. We're discussing Tennessee's loss to Georgia, 27-13 between the hedges, but still a lot of room for postseason movements, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because of the things that transpired Saturday night. And we'll continue to talk more about that as the week goes on. Let's get into the scoring plays and kind of hear, courtesy of the Vol Radio Network, with Bob Kessling, play-by-play guy, and Pat Ryan as color of BFL. Pat Ryan, let's hear how the scoring plays sounded for courtesy of the Vol Radio Network on Saturday night. It was good for Tennessee. Tennessee took an early 3-0 lead just about 5 minutes into the football game. Chase McGrath connected on a 47-yard field goal, capping a 6-play drive, 17 yards. The defense forced the turnover early. Latrell Bumpus got his paw in there and forced a turnover, and Tennessee led 3-0 early in this football game.
This will be right out a 47-yard attempt, right in the middle of the field, no wind, as Chase McGrath comes on out of the hole to Paxton Brooks. Matthew Solansky to snap it. Kick is on the way, and the kick is spinning to the uprights, and that is good.
Georgia would come back. Obviously, it was not down for long. In fact, it was down for less than 2 minutes in this football game. That was it. Stetson Bennett, he ran in from 13 yards, capping a 5-play, 80-yard drive. Only 1:30 off the clock to take a 7-3 lead. And here's how it sounded, courtesy of the Vol Radio Network.
Bunch package to the right. Bennett back to throw. Looks. Being blitzed. Bennett rolls to the right.
Oh!
Runs. Gets down to the 15, to the 10, to the 5. He runs for the corner of the end zone, and let's say he's going to be knocked out at the 1-yard line. Jalin McCullough hit hin out at the pylon. They might look at this to see if he got in the end zone.
Yeah, he touched the pylon with the ball.
After review, the ruling is touchdown. The runner was inbounds with firm control of the ball when he touched the pylon.
And, of course, the play went to review. It was held up. Juwan Mitchell nearly had him in the backfield. He was free off a blitz, and Stetson Bennett made a miss. And, of course, that drive was also set up by the 52-yard reception from Arian Smith. All right, so Georgia continued on. Ladd McConkey, who had a really, really good game, he found pay dirt on the first play after Tennessee was backed up in its own end zone, punt the football away. Georgia had a 1st and 10 from like the 36. Great field position. Georgia took a shot early, found Ladd McConkey, 37 yards. It was a 7-second scoring drive, and Georgia led 14-3 after this touchdown pass.
Bowers in motion to the right, now back to the left. And Bennett's going to play fake. Going to roll to the right. Set up. Fires long. Wide open McConkey. Touchdown, Georgia. He got behind Danico Slaughter, and Stetson Bennett on play number 1 after the punt bombs it to McConkey for 37 yards, and Georgia stuns Tennessee with a long pass, and the Bulldogs now lead Tennessee 13-3. Bennett, as usual, right on target.
Georgia scored another touchdown, in the second quarter, or in the first half. It was Stetson Bennett, a 5-yard touchdown pass to Marcus Rosemy Jack Saint, as I believe is how you say his name. It capped a 64-yard, 6-play drive to make it 21-3. And that touchdown, of course, was set up from the 49-yard reception from Kenny McIntosh out of the backfield on a wheel route where he ran right behind Jalin McCullough. Here's how it sounded. Then I'll kind of break down that play a little bit more.
Claps his hands, gets the snap, drops. Looks right, looks left, looks over the middle. Pass is caught in the back of the end zone. Was he inbounds? Touchdown, Georgia. Touchdown to Marcus Rosemy Jake Saint.
Like I said in segment one, sometimes football players make good football plays. Sure, you had the receiver that beat Danico Slaughter, and he was going to the back of the end zone, but you had a safety, and I believe it was McCullough that was sinking back, and Bennett had to throw the football over the leaping McCullough and then dip it right down in there to the back of the end zone to where his receiver can make the catch, and it all worked according to plan. Sometimes football players make good football plays. As nerve-wracking as it is and how angry it is, that's what happened on that play. So Georgia leading 21-3 just inside the second quarter. Chase McGrath will get Tennessee back on the scoreboard. 36-yard field goal to make it a 21-6 football game. This coming at the 9:36 mark of the second quarter.
So Chase McGrath, who already has one field goal today, good from 47, will try this one from 36. It's on the right hash as he kicks it from left to right into the closed end of the stadium. Snap down, kick is on the way, and McGrath, perfect, right down the middle.
You know, it was good that Tennessee got on the scoreboard, don't get me wrong, but could have been a touchdown. Tennessee was at the +9, as I mentioned, on those self-inflicting wounds back in segment number one. Was at the +9 for third down. A couple of false start penalties made it 3rd and 12 from the 19. You failed to get it, so you had to settle for a field goal. That was a little nerve-wracking. So Tennessee, within striking distance, 21-6, but it does make it a 3-score game. Georgia does heading into the locker room as time expires. A 19-yard field goal makes it 24-6.
On the left hash, it'll be a 19-yard attempt out of the hold of Stetson Bennett. Snap down, kick on the way, and that is good.
Georgia comes back in the second half. It does score 3 in the third quarter, and that's the only scoring that happened in that quarter. It milked the clock there. This is coming from a 67-yard drive off 15 plays. It took 8 minutes and 44 seconds off the clock. It was another 38-yard field goal for Georgia, making it 27-6 at that point in the football game. Tennessee comes back and does score a touchdown finally. It took 3.5 quarters, but Tennessee gets into the end zone with 4:15 left on the clock, 61 yards on 8 plays. It was Jalin Wright, a 5-yard touchdown rush to make it 27-13.
First down, first and goal at the 5. Handoff right up the middle. Touchdown, Tennessee. Took a while, but Tennessee finally gets on the board with a touchdown with 4:15 remaining as Jalin Wright took it right up the middle for the score. That's his 6th rushing touchdown of the season, and that makes it 27-12.
Again, that's how it sounded, courtesy of the Vol Radio Network. I do have written permission from the Vol Radio Network to play those audio calls for audio and video here on the Locked On Vols channel. All right, stats and Kaner grades. How will I grade each individual position group from the loss at Georgia? Again, if you're just joining us here if you're watching on Premiere or just checking out midway through the episode, go back to segment 1. Tennessee is still in a really good position in terms of postseason aspirations, but we're going to get into those stat sheets, talk about what went wrong, and I give you my grades. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Vols. Before we get into that, guys, I do want to remind you about some of our proud sponsors over at BetOnline. Really do appreciate them for always supporting our show. It's your number one source for the betting at football and the start of college basketball season. Hey, Tennessee basketball starts tonight, and we're going to talk about some of that tomorrow, of course, but it is still football season. But Tennessee basketball starts tonight. You can find the latest player developments, the team matchups, the news, the podcast, in-depth analysis on every single game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information, live betting, and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, the World Series just wrapped up, of course, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head on over to the website today or use your mobile device. Learn about all the latest trends in the action. Remember, I said earlier, Tennessee, according to BetOnline, 21-point favorites against Missouri for the nooner here. That game is also going to be on CBS this Saturday. Check that line and a whole lot more over at BetOnline. It is where the game starts. A little late to the party mentioning this here on a Monday show, but you guys do know that Twitter Tuesdays when your voice is heard on the show. So @_Kaner, @LockedOnVols. Give me any questions, comments, concerns you have for Tennessee's loss at Georgia, what it means for the rest of the season. But the Tennessee Volunteers are now 8-1 on the year, 4-1 in SEC play, coming off a loss to Georgia. So we talked about the big plays and the big takeaways and the self-inflicting wounds and the 3 chunk plays on defense. We went over that. We heard what it sounded like on the Vol Radio Network. Now let's dive in to the nitty-gritty. Let's look at that stat sheet and it doesn't look pretty at times, right? Overall, Tennessee came into the showcase averaging as the country's number one offensive team in terms of yards and scoring. Well, Tennessee was held to just 13 points on 289 yards of total offense. 75 plays. Tennessee averages 3.9 yards a snap. That is not Tennessee football. Georgia, meanwhile, 387 yards total, which is, not horrible. It's the second best offense in terms of total offense in the country behind Tennessee. Tennessee's defense, 387 yards. Kirby had the lead. It was raining in the second half, but still, credit to the defense. 62 plays, 6.2 yards per play. Tennessee was penalized. I mentioned that earlier. 8 pre-snap penalties, 9 overall in the game for 55 yards. Tennessee and Georgia both turned the football over twice. Tennessee threw an interception, Hendon's second interception of the game. And also on that play, you just converted a 4th and inches. I don't hate that play. You're taking a shot, but he kind of forced it, just going up to Cedric Tillman. Keely Ringo made a heck of a play. I mean, he pretty much got inside leverage, ran the route, boxed out Tillman, and made a play. But still, I mean, Hendon didn't have to force it in that situation. But you were trying to take a shot, but you were down at that point 21-6, I believe, or 21-3, whatever it was. But Tennessee fumbled, had an interception. Georgia fumbled twice. Passing yards, Tennessee only 195 yards for Hendon Hooker, 22 of 33, no touchdowns, 1 interceptions. Stetson Bennett, 257 yards through the air. Bennett, this is a Hendon Hooker stat, but not for Saturday. Bennett averaged 15.1 yards per completion. That's a really, really good stat. Rushing yards, Tennessee wasn't great, but in this game last year, you ran for 55 yards, nearly doubled that. You had 94 yards on the ground. Remember, Hooker was sacked 6 times as well, so that negates from that total, or from the grand total, the net, or from the yards gained. But 94 yards on 2.2 yards per carry for Tennessee. That's not a good stat. Georgia, 130 yards, 3.5 yards per carry. It's respectable. Tennessee didn't let him go all out. Tennessee possessed the football for 29 minutes. Georgia had it for 31 minutes. Tennessee was not good on third downs, 2 of 14 offensively. We're 3 of 5 on fourth downs. You had 7 of 12 for Georgia, converted on 7 of 12 in this football game. Tennessee had got to find a way to get off that football field. Red zone chances, Tennessee was 2 of 3, did score 1 touchdown, and kicked a field goal as well. Georgia was 4 of 4, scoring touchdowns on 2 of the 4 trips. Hendon Hooker, as I mentioned, 70% completion. And we'll talk about this, when we, as the week goes on with kind of stacking up Heisman and all that. CJ Stroud did not have a good game against Northwestern. He ran for a lot, but he did not have a good football game. Hendon Hooker did not have a good football game. 70% of his passes, though, he did complete still in a game that I would give him the grade of D. And we'll go ahead and start giving my Caner grades out here. Hendon Hooker gets a D in this football game. Had the interception. He held on to the football so long. He did not help out his offensive linemen whatsoever in this football game. They weren't great, but those 6 sacks, a number of those are on Hendon Hooker. 23 of 33, no touchdowns, 1 interception, $195, did complete 70%. He wasn't the worst we've ever seen from a Tennessee quarterback, but now we hold Hendon Hooker to such a high standard, and that wasn't it on Saturday. So a rough game for Hendon Hooker, in my opinion. Hendon Hooker gets a D in terms of my Caner grades. Running the backs. Jalin Wright came over, took over for Jabari Small, who went out. He took a shot on that right shoulder. We know about the durability of that shoulder. It's been an ongoing issue throughout his career. And he took a shot, went out, came back in for a play or two, and then went back out, and we never really saw him again. Jalin Wright, he ran for 69 yards, averaging 3.3 yards a carry. Did score a touchdown, but he fumbled once. He did fumble. He continues to have issues holding on to the football. It was raining at that point, but it still counts. So Wright, 69 yards. Jabari Small, 8 yards on 3 carries before he left the ball game. Hendon Hooker, he gained 17 yards, but he lost a lot because, again, he was sacked in this football game. Overall, Tennessee ran it 42 times for 94 yards and a touchdown. I would give the running back group a D overall. So quarterbacks get a D. Running backs get a D. Let's go to tight ends and wide receivers. Tight ends overall, Jacob Warren was targeted twice on third downs. I thought that was kind of big from Hendon Hooker, showing the trust there. Princeton Fant, don't think he had a very good game. I'll give the tight ends a C overall. The wide receivers, they'll get a C. Tillman was targeted 8 times, 7 receptions, 68 yards. Jalin Hyatt targeted 8 times, 6 receptions, 63 yards. Brew McCoy targeted 11 times for 6 receptions, 38 yards. Didn't get behind the defense. A lot of that's on on the play calling and as well as the quarterback. So I'll give the wide receivers a C for this football game. And then again, offense overall. The offensive line, it always starts up front. For as good as they've been here lately, wasn't the best game. Jalen Carter had a really, really good football game. That is for sure. Didn't run the ball, didn't set the tone running the football in this football game, didn't live up to your season averages, of course, or even anywhere close to that. Not all those 6 sacks are on the offensive line, but I'll still say the offensive line gets an overall grade of a D in this football game. All right, let's move on to Georgia, or let's move on to the defense, shall we? Stetson Bennett, of course, he completed 68% of his passes, 257 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kenny McIntosh, 52 rushing yards. Dujon Edwards, 46 rushing yards. Kendall Milton, 8 rushing yards. Branson Robinson, 6 rushing yards. 130 overall for Georgia. Did have a rushing touchdown. Excuse me. Ladd McConkey was the third down hero. He was everywhere on third downs, it seemed like. Tennessee could not find an answer for Ladd McConkey on third downs. He led the way, 94 yards, 5 receptions, and a touchdown. Marcus Rosemary-Jackson, of course, had that touchdown in the back of the end zone. So, defensively, let's talk about some grades here. Outside of a couple big plays there in the first half, running the football, I thought they really settled in. 130 yards against Georgia is not bad. Georgia averages 204 yards a game. It's not great, but it's not bad. And the defensive line by itself had 3 TFLs on the day. I think the defensive line overall is going to get a C per my grades. Linebackers, were they perfect? No. Did they overrun some plays? Yes. Did they miss a tackle here and there? Yes. I thought Juwan Mitchell and Jeremy Banks played good football games. I thought Aaron Beasley had a really nice TFL there towards the end of the football game. Weren't perfect. There's a lot of things they did in there that I don't know what the scheme was, but I'm giving the linebackers a B. That group in itself had 3 TFLs and 15 combined tackles for Jeremy Banks and Juwan Mitchell. I like what I saw from the linebackers. I give them a B in this football game. And then, you go look at the secondary. Big play given up by Slaughter. Big play given up by McCullough. Big play given up by Brandon Turnage, although I thought that was really good coverage by Turnage. They missed some tackles. We'll get into that with the PFF grades later on in the week. But you did give up 3 chunk plays. Defense settled in. Thought defense might not have played well enough to win the game, but I think the bigger story is the lack of offense in this football game, of course. But the defense overall, you still give up those chunk plays from 3 DBs. The DBs get a C, although I think it could have been better. They get a C in that regard. They hold an offense that throws for over 300 yards down to 257 through the air. Special teams, Paxton Brooks averaged 37 yards per punt. I think he had one right around the 10-yard line, but McGrath, 2 for 2, and nice little bounce back game for him. He missed a PAT last week. 2 for 2 for Chase McGrath. Special teams will get a B in this one. And then finally, coaching. Wasn't a huge fan of the offensive play calling throughout the game. I mean, obviously wasn't the reason they lost the football game. There was one third down call that I really didn't like. It was a draw on 3rd and inches. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. I'll give the coaching in this football game a C. Was the reason Tennessee lost this game on coaches? Absolutely not. Could the coaches have helped them out a little bit better? Sure, but also the players could have gone out there and executed. I'll give the coaching a C in this football game. So, quarterback play, D. Running back, D. Tight end, C. Wide receiver, C. O-line, D. When you're well below your season averages as the number 1 offense in the country, those are the grades you're going to get. Those are just my grades. These are obviously just my opinions. Defensively, D-line a C. Linebackers a B. DBs a C. Special teams a B. And coaching is a C as well. And those are the stats and your Caner grades. Hey, I should have mentioned this earlier in the show. I think I did also, but Twitter Tuesday tomorrow. Any questions, comments that you now I know I do remember. Twitter Tuesday tomorrow, mailbag. Get me any questions, comments, concerns. We will continue to break down Tennessee and Georgia throughout the week. We will get ready for Tennessee and Missouri throughout the week. We'll take a look at your questions on Tuesday. Pro Football Focus. Tennessee basketball gets started here tonight. And, of course, the playoff committee where Tennessee is ranked. I still think Tennessee is in a really good spot. All right, that's all the time I have for tonight. Can't thank you enough for your continued support. Subscribing on YouTube. If you haven't already, please do. Hit that like button. Let's help get this over 200 and then eventually 500 likes. And as always, wherever you find your podcast, you can listen to it completely free on your audio platforms. All right, guys, thanks so much for making Locked On Balls your first listen. Now check out Locked On Sports Today. Make that your second listen. You can get the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you find your podcast. As always, guys, thank you so much. I know this past weekend wasn't fun, but there's another game to be played, and Tennessee is still one of the best football teams in the country. Same time, same place. We will do it again tomorrow right here on Locked On Vols.